My question for you here today is, are you stressed? And are you living in accordance with your values for work-life balance? This is something near and dear to my heart, and I've explored it quite extensively. So this episode is about stress. This episode is about living in accordance with our values. And my lens, the perspective I'm going to take is, let's say it's the traditional Chinese medical theory, it's a handful of words, diagnosis of Western culture. What that diagnosis is, it's overly yang. And what that means as a cultural zeitgeist, as a cultural belief system that is the greater momentum for most of the population. What effect is that having on our mental, emotional health and the general, let's call it, stream of our evolution? Now, let's just talk about stress first, and then we'll get into that more complex and for some foreign languaging of yin and yang, yeah? So, stress. About 1/4 of Canadians report high to extreme stress on most days. A recent poll found that 40% of Canadians feel more stress than they did a year ago. And over half, 58%, also notice that others around them are more stressed. Stress levels tend to peak during the core working ages of 35 to 54, and decrease in older age groups. Now, those are the statistics, and some of what I'm offering here is one of the factors in why the modern world is more stressed. And I'm sure you can list many factors, as we're an evolving society and there's a lot going on that's much different than we had 100 years, 1,000 years. Irregardless of that, what I'm focusing on here today is the belief systems that drive behavior. And this is a holistic, or you could think of it as a traditional Chinese medicine perspective, as well as many indigenous wisdom traditions. They think in terms of the mind, the body, the emotions, and the spirit. And the understanding is things start subtle and then they develop into the gross. Our thoughts are related to our feelings, and our feelings connect in with our physical. And there's a feedback, of course, from the physical to the subtle, from the body to the mind, and to the mind to the body, yeah? And there are foundational beliefs and foundational movements of energy. In Qigong, we track these as yin and yang, as complementary opposites, as mutually arising opposites, yeah? Just as the yin and yang symbol has, there's a little yin within yang and a little yang within yin. And the symbol shows them in harmony, in the swirling balance, yeah? And this is the ideal. So in traditional Chinese medicine, the yin and yang theory helps us to determine what's out of balance. So if something's too hot, cool it. If something's in excess, let's see if we can reduce it. If something is deficient, on the other hand, let's see if we can tonify or bring it some nourishment to it. It's very simple, but sometimes simple things are overlooked for complex. So when I say society is too young, this is a generalization about a movement of energy that relates in this context more so towards the nature of doing rather than being. Doing relates to using energy, external activity, and general extroversion. There's a growth orientation, and this movement of energy we can contrast with the yin polarity, more receptive and passive, more about relaxation and being, finding stillness and fulfillment. These kind of things, not the goal orientation. And now, this isn't like one is better than the other. I'm not trying to get at growth, like the growth mindset is not the good thing. This is a great thing. But yin and yang can become out of balance. Too much of any medicine is a poison. Too little of any medicine, not enough. It's about a prescriptive amount of the right thing at the right time. And Taoism and Chinese medicine and the system of Qigong, among other internal art systems, has a lot to offer us in this time. And I'm not trying to promote Taoism. We don't need more isms, in my opinion. I'm not a Taoist either. But it's often a paired idea, a philosophical basis for Qigong and Chinese medicine, as this is where its roots come from. But there's great parallels in history. It's not the first time a society has swung too far into the yang dimension. In China, this happened. Confucianism is much more yang and rule-based, much more masculine in that way. Whereas Taoism came at a time where it was medicine, much more non-linear, much more feminine and creative. I see this as a similar parallel as to what is going on here in the Western society. A pole shift is happening to bring about more harmony. And it's not that it has to shift right over into the feminine, right? It's a matter of balancing masculine and feminine, yin and yang. So we'll put a little flag note in there, and then I just want to share a little bit of other statistics here that are relevant for our current conversation. So not all nations are as stressed as we are. I've had the fortunate experience of traveling to many countries where, in my experience of them, the people there are less stressed, less hurried, more present, and insofar as I can see, more fulfilled. There's not so much of a stress pulse, a busyness in their mind and activity. And looking to the studies, this place called Monaco is consistently ranked as the least stressful country, and it's followed by other European nations like Luxembourg and Switzerland. Now they look at different scores of wellness here, things like work-life balance, financial security, and overall quality of life. So there are exemplary places. None of these places I've been to. But what I'd like to extract from this information is a sense of security, safety, and then the work-life balance. Now, safety is something very important. Of course, if your nation is not safe, it's going to be a very stressful place. But Canada is pretty safe in terms of wars, in terms of crime, these kinds of things. But the feeling of not feeling safe, that's still present insofar as I can feel in my own system and insofar as the people that I treat in my breathwork clinic, because many people aren't completely liberated. I'm not completely liberated from all fears. So we have fear-based beliefs that are old conditioning and programs and patterns from our ancestors from the past. And we carry these forward in subtle and gross ways. Each individual has their own set of limiting and negative beliefs and fear-based beliefs that they carry, and the general culture. Now, this isn't going to be a multi-episode deep dive into these topics, which would be fascinating, but I'm going to focus my attention on a few basic things here, because we could go into the very initiation of what we could call Western culture and its foundational axioms of how it was developed and why it took more of a societal and cultural shift towards doing, towards a more yang nature, which is more typified in the West, whereas the Eastern cultures traditionally have been much more about being and meditation and the development of the internal world. We see the West 100 years ago or so as being the leaders in innovation and technology and exploration, very outward, very extroverted. But the places like India and China, far superior in their internal navigation of the internal landscape. So we're finding as a collective more harmony and balance in East and West, and the lines are more blurred, but still in the West predominantly we are more extroverted, more yang. Now what I'm going to offer, there are many factors in this, as I mentioned, with the very axioms of why we developed in this way. One thing I'll point out is that I believe it's due to unmet needs within, such as the sense of safety, inner peace, and a shared connection and feeling to all of our relations. And my proposition here is that the teachings of Qigong, with the philosophical background in Taoism and some of the wisdom from traditional Chinese medicine, may offer a lot of good keys, a lot of good codes and information towards bringing about more balance in your life, which can eventually rip out into the collective. At least this has been my experience, and I like to share in these podcasts some information and teachings, and a lot of them come from my own experience, my own direct experience in my life. So I'll share a little bit about my story with what I'm talking about and the people that I work with and help. And my offering and my prayer that this would be of some help towards you. So, coming back to that original proposition, Western society is yang. I've explained a little bit about the yin and yang theory, that as a collective, there's a little bit more of a steering towards doing and action, using energy, extroversion, and working. Now, the position that I'm going to go deeper into is that there's a conscious and subconscious belief held by most of the population. Well, not just a belief, many beliefs, but it's fear-based beliefs that prevent individuals from shifting more in towards the opposite pole of yin. There's a fear of slowing down. There's a fear of slowing down because when an individual slows down, they have to be confronted with what's inside. In order to go inside, like with any depth inside towards your center, and you have to be present for what is arising within you. And there's almost like this mind of allowing the outer layers to come up, to come deeper into the inner being. There's a systematic science of meditation and coming to your center. This languaging might be quite unfamiliar, but I'll do my best to explain it in a way that is clear for the general listener, yeah? So when an individual sits in meditation, maybe you've practiced this for some years or for some time, or not at all. You're confronted with your mind, and for many people, sitting with themselves is not a comfortable thing. It's like if you're alone in a room with nothing there, I would say the majority of people wouldn't just close their eyes unless they're really tired and turn within and just be present with the arising sensations and thoughts. And if they did, they would get caught, in my opinion, in the superficial layers of mind, thinking about this and thinking about that, or they would distract themselves or develop some kind of entertainment which is extroverted. This is due to our conditioning and the ways in which we know how to relate to our mind, yeah? Now, in meditation, we learn to not engage with the mind, not to feed the mind with thinking, because you can think, and the mind will continue to think more thoughts. The mind can move faster than the speed of light. It can be at one side of the universe, and then it can go over to Pluto, and then it can go here and then there. The mind has no end. It's endless if we continue to feed it. My understanding would be that this would be dopamine fueled. Every time we think a thought and then we continue to think another thought, there's a dopamine pulse. This is just hypothesis. This is not really relevant if that's true or not, but there's some kind of feeding of the mind which gives it energy, yeah? And most people have been feeding their minds consistently since they were young because of the way that we've been taught and raised. Once again, this is due to the conditioning. This is not just in our lifetimes, but in many ancestral lifetimes for generations of how we have lived, not been taught the ways of meditation, of yin and relaxation in a developed way. So we develop ways of being and relating to our mind and ourself, which is, as I'm expressing it, quite superficial. We stay on the periphery of mind. There's a depth to our mind as expressed in kind of a Western understanding as the subconscious and unconscious, which are what are usually not conscious, but they are accessible. So there's a depth and layers to the mind that take, let's call it process or methods in order to get to those. Now, in order to get to the deeper levels of mind, we generally have to pass through the thought, yeah, and a lot of negative emotion, to be honest. This is what comes up in meditation if an individual is willing to be present. And this is not part of the practice to be transcended in the sense that you're a good meditator if you don't experience these things. There's not really a good meditation in the ordinary sense of, oh, I had a positive experience, therefore it was good. It's more like I was present for the meditation, good things came up, bad things came up, and I had a detachment or neutral positioning, and I kept my mind in equanimity. The equanimity is the gold here. So this takes some work, and this takes often some formal training and teaching from a established teacher to guide somebody into meditation, because once you start to go deeper into the psyche, there can be an unraveling. This can be relieving, like popping a pustule infection and relieving a wound. It can also be to relieve a very deep wound, not just a superficial one that's on the surface ready to pop, but a very deep, what they would call in pathology, a fistula or something deep down, which can be quite painful as it comes out, as our psyche begins to open up and unravel, yeah? And I don't want to go too deep into meditation and its process here because it's going to take us off the course and path. So I'm going to recorrect myself a little bit here and chart what I was going through. I was coming back to when an individual is alone in the room, yeah? And they have their mind really active, staying on the superficial layers. There's these techniques to get closer into meditation. But most people won't venture into this territory because of the unprocessed emotion. And the gold here is that a lot of this is our fear-based beliefs and the conditioned grooves of our mind, the thinking patterns as a result of the deeper held fears. And our mind stays superficial in a lot of our lives. I'll speak for myself. A lot of my life is superficial because I'm not going into depth within myself, because I'm actually acting out a series of control patterns and things that I think will bring me safety, and they bring me a certain level of comfortability, which is more like being numb than actually knowing myself at its raw depth of what I'm feeling in the present moment. So I can share my story here, and this will give a lot more, a lot clearer of an example of what I'm talking about, yeah? So I became an entrepreneur about 6 years ago, and it wasn't long before I was running events, one-on-ones, retreats, podcasting, YouTubing, practicing martial arts, internal arts that I teach on top of multiple streams of education, apprenticeship, and much, much more. As I hopped into the entrepreneurial world while living in Squamish, I did what I saw others doing. I took the advice of successful entrepreneurs around me, and I followed the zeitgeist. Now, my example is unique to me, so it doesn't necessarily represent the majority in all ways. But the general pattern of following the cultural zeitgeist of doing is fairly representative insofar as I can see it in the Western culture, in Canada. There's a growing fascination, you could say, with doing so many things. And even for somebody like me who's into, let's call it spirituality in its broadest umbrella term, someone who teaches internal arts such as meditation and yoga. But spirituality has so many flavors. There's not like one way to be spiritual. So spirituality, let's say, evolves or mixes with the local cultures of where it is, and there's something that is created. And the spirituality I had years before moving to Squamish was much different. When I moved to Squamish and became an entrepreneur and followed the zeitgeist of what people were doing in a similar circumstance, in a similar place, everything became very young. very young, doing so much yoga, going to so many ceremonies, going into so much process, on and on, like I was getting reps and I was training for a spiritual marathon. It only took me a few years before signs of burnout started to affect my performance and I became weaker and weaker. And though certain aspects of my spirituality and my business and my life were greatly expanding, and there was a lot of joy and growth, you could say, for sure, there was also aspects of me that were not being integrated or met. And after a few years, I didn't reach a level of success where I feel like I could take my foot off the brake and slow down, even though I recognized some of these basic patterns. So what I did was what I thought would be best was just to keep up with everybody, and eventually I'll reach a level of success where I'll have enough money to take off the time or develop the work-life balance. And a lot of this in my day-to-day, moment-to-moment experience was fear-based. I didn't feel safe or secure to slow down. So there was many opportunities when I could have nourished myself. I have many of the practices in my toolkit and repertoire. I could have done less working out and done more yin yoga. But even when I tried to do that, my system didn't want to slow down often. And even when I was slowing down and practicing meditation, which I did and have been doing on a regular basis, pretty well every day for 8+ years, most of that was like, it's just as I was explaining, it's very superficial. There was not a lot of depth in meditation. It was more to try to bring about a state of regulation. Most of the practice would just be to calm my mind enough to feel a little bit at peace. So there was never much depth in meditation. It's like if you were to work out and you are so tight that you're just getting through the warm-up and never actually getting any reps in. Not a lot of growth in that domain. So I did my best, and I continued to be young even though my body was telling me to slow down, and I became more and more burnt out. And yang can also fuel yang. It's like this cycle of when there's a lot of stress and things to do, I try to get better at doing things so I can do more things. Sometimes the mind doesn't want to go to the other thing, which is maybe you can drop all the things. There's a certain, once again, a fear-based belief. And once fear gets in the mind, we're much more likely to go into the control patterns. Control patterns are things that we do to control ourselves, to bring about a sense of safety. Now, for me, these can be quite healthy things like working out and yoga, but if they're a control pattern that's fueled by a fear-based belief, this isn't going to help with the actual soul's evolution. It's, once again, it's a control pattern to bring about a state of safety without actually going into growth. So this can be very deceiving for many people who externally see a certain level of success or drive or motivation, and people far more successful than me and build entire empires based on these fear-based beliefs, but deep within inside they don't have fulfillment, an inner peace. Yeah, it's the same old story. This is nothing new, but we all got to go through it in order to get to the other side and find what that means for us, if this is our relevant themes that we're exploring in this life. And many of us in the West are exploring this. Yeah. So when an individual becomes really goal orientated, it fuels the mind day and night, and this obsessive seeking for what is beyond the moment can block the capacity to feel fulfillment in the moment. It can seem more like goals and goals and goals and always wanting to increase performance. And when the general culture is all doing this without the support of, hey, there's another way to do this, without that kind of community support or friend support or having somewhere to go, it can be hard. Even for somebody like me, where I do have many environments where I can go. Still, I found myself very affected and caught up in these ways. Now, speaking about me personally, for those that follow the human design system, I'm a reflector. Reflector is a very small portion of the population, about 1%. So we're not the general person. In so far as the system says, the general person, the mass majority of people have consistent energy and they're meant to be the workers and producers in life. But just like the system of the body has many different cells, there are some cells that are a little bit more specialized. So my specialization as a reflector is the canary in the coal mine. You know this analogy, yeah? In certain coal mines throughout history, they get these gas pockets and they can kill all the people there. So they keep a canary, a little bird that has a very sensitive respiratory system. And when the gas hits, the canary will die. So when they see the canary has died, they have a few moments or minutes to get out of there, and that can save many individuals in the coal mine at the loss of the canary. The idea is something similar with the reflector. I'm much more sensitive to my environment than other individuals. I'm much more chameleon. As I go into an environment, I become it more so than other individuals. So when I go into a healthy environment, I reflect that and amplify that energy. When I go into an unhealthy environment, I reflect that and amplify that energy in my own system. So one of my roles in the human design system and part of my purpose is to offer my reflections on what I'm experiencing in my body, which are telling of the greater society or whatever the environment is, yeah? So when I'm speaking of what I'm speaking of here, I experienced the burnout in my system more severe than many because of the sensitivity in my system, which is very connected to the environment. So I'm the canary saying, people are stressed out here. And it's not just in Squamish, it's the sea to sky corridor that I'm very connected with. And it's found throughout. This is Vancouver, this is Whistler. So what am I doing to find my harmony? And then I'll branch off into how this can help you and what I can also conclude and connect with the Taoism and traditional Chinese medicine I was speaking about in the beginning. Well, for me, I had to get really clear on my values, the values for how I want to live. Part of this is connecting with universal principles. For example, the 7 Hermetic principles are amazing. I recommend everyone to read these, as well as Arnold Patton's Universal Principles. Bashar has some very beautiful universal principles. Universal principles are articulations. It doesn't matter if there's 7 of them or 20 something of them that Arnold Patton has. These are just articulations. They're useful insofar as they are tools. They have different contexts. They are here to express fundamental truths about the universe, about the cosmos, about the universal laws, insofar, in as best as they can. So the 7 Hermetic principles, if I can riff on them right now, is the all is one principle. All is God, all is mind. As above, so below. We are the microcosms of the macrocosms. Everything is fundamentally vibration. Everything has rhythm and cycles like seasons. There are laws to cause and effect. So vibrationally, what we put out is what we get back. There's a law of gender. Everything has a masculine and a feminine polarity, which goes with the law of polarity. Everything has a yin and yang pole. So I got really clear about what my values are and how to act upon them in accordance with the universal principles. So why am I mentioning this here? It's like I was acting to try to fit in with what the other entrepreneurs doing with the cultural zeitgeist, the cultural milieu, yeah? And I say that most of Western society in this excessive yang is out of harmony with universal principles, the kind of universal principles that can be sustained in a sustainable way to live in harmony with the planet. So just like Confucianism had to adapt and go in its pole shift, the Western culture, insofar as I can see it, this is a generalization on the vast majority of energy and nothing specific, yeah? there needs to be a pole shift towards the yin, towards the greater connection of fulfillment found within an inner peace and the balancing of our relationship with nature, among other things. So I began to act more and more on my values and to double down in my faith in universal principles and in my faith that I will have what I need when I need it. And I don't want you to, sometimes I hear this spiritual stuff and there are many stories of this and I'm sure they're true. And I don't want to give rose-colored glasses or whatever that phrase is about everything is sunshine. So it's not like I acted on my values and everything worked out. Money came, my health bounced back immediately, and it was like bada bing, bada boom. It was like I began to act on my values and I had to close off a bunch of things, and it was a really big struggle and it tested me a lot. And it brought up a lot of suppressed emotion that I'd been going through and a really intense healing. And did everything work out? I mean, everything is success and failure. There's highs and there's lows. These are the rhythms and polarities of life. Yeah, I don't get to transcend that at that level. That will always be the case. So I don't want to give that misdirection there. But what I can tell you is living to a greater degree of integrity with my values connects me more with my heart and my soul. And the feeling of feeling more fulfilled. So many feelings. And there's less things in my life, less doings. And there's a really beautiful level of detachment between not needing to care about the things that I was caring about. And I didn't really care about those things. Feeling lots of things, not caring about lots of things. Apparently that's what I'm all about right now. So I make more time. I make more time for meditation and the people I care about. And I don't know where this goes. I don't know if I can live in Squamish in the way that I would like to, in accordance with my values, what can all adjust. I'm going through a realignment within myself first and most importantly, and then externally I'll make the decisions in accordance with what is arising within. There's a greater leaning into my internal sense of guidance. So I'm still determining if a place like Squamish, where I am as a reflector, very susceptible to my environments, can I find a work-life balance? Or am I destined to move somewhere where I feel more in harmony? So even though I'm a reflector, this isn't what would you call that? I'm not limited by my design because I have life force energy and a capacity to work with it. Now, living out of my design so much so that I'm really not listening to the signals in my body and I'm trying to persist in something that is just not good for me. I mean, there's always teachings in everything we do, but there's a point of madness in it all. I'm not at the point of madness. Squamish is a beautiful place. I really love it here, and I have a really beautiful community and a business out here. So I needed to shift my basic beliefs, my values, and my practices. Over the years, as I was mentioning, I became more yang, and the yang was fueling more yang. I was doing less meditation, though consistent, and I was becoming more extroverted in my practices. So I looked in, I said in the beginning, I could be doing more yin things, but I would have to deal with the uncomfortability of slowing down. So I dealt with the uncomfortability of slowing down, and I practiced more Qigong, more yin yoga. And Qigong, for those of you who don't know much about it, there are many different streams of Qigong. It's an umbrella term in some sense, which is actually quite recent. It's not an ancient term. It just means energy skill. The idea of Qigong, you could say, was developed by the Wu, the WU, which is a female group of shaman in ancient China. Later, the male shaman wrote a lot of the information down that was downloaded from the Wu shaman. And traditional Chinese medicine was created from this. So there's 4 main branches of TCM. That being Qigong, massage, acupuncture, and herbology. Qigong being the oldest and most mystical branch. Now, traditional Chinese medicine and Qigong has developed since then over, thousands of years, yeah? We never know how far back these things go. And there are many thousands of schools. You can kind of think of it. I don't like to think of yoga like Qigong because, in as much as that can be a helpful way for people to understand it, it can lead to a lot of confusion. But I'm going to do it anyways right here. There's a number of different systems of yoga, such as ways of practicing from yin to power, right? And there's many different systems in Qigong that have any number of different ways of cultivating our system. Unlike yoga, the three main branches you could think of Qigong is the spiritual or alchemical branch, which is the stream of practices that help an individual to cultivate their energy system to return to source. It's a path of enlightenment. There's medical Qigong, which has grown parallel to traditional Chinese medicine and uses the foundational theories such as yin and yang theory and five element theory, meridian and channel theory, etc., to bring about health and balance in the body. We'll talk a little bit more about that momentarily. And then there's martial. These are practices related to martial arts. Pretty self-explanatory on that one. So I really appreciate the benefits of Qigong in my life. They have been instrumental for me in the last few years. I've been practicing Qigong. I kind of first learned about it about 7 years ago and went deeper into it about 5 years ago. And how does Qigong pair with traditional Chinese medicine? That's a whole podcast, but let me give you a little bit of a teaser on that. The traditional Chinese medicine system is very simple in the sense of it describes fundamental qualities of energy. Remember how I was talking about yin and yang theory, in that something's too hot, we want to cool it? There's very simple ways of describing energy, which when I learned the system of TCM, some of it's super intuitive, some of it's absolutely not. But it's yin and yang, right? Some of it's going to be intuitive and some of it's going to be not. That's the balance. But a lot of it's super intuitive. If something is sensitive, say you're doing a body tap. You've probably seen this before, yeah? Somebody's tapping their body and they find an area that is sensitive in their body. Typically, this means there's some type of stagnation of the qi. The energy is not flowing there. There's an imbalance there, yeah? So tap it, hit it hard till there's circulation flowing. It's deficient, it needs something, and you'll give it the energy when you tap it. That's kind of a gross oversimplification, but you get it, yeah? And I mean, that practice alone, say I tap my whole body, and I know my meridians are, and you can always look these up if you don't. If you find a bunch of areas that are sensitive, you can chart where the meridians may be blocked, what those meridians are, and then look up what the effects of having those meridians blocked are, yeah? But maybe it's not. Maybe you want to work a little bit more with the Western mind and you start tapping your liver and you notice your liver is sore. The liver meridian channel is there, but also this could just be something going on with your liver. And I mean, traditional Chinese medicine is holistic, and often when we have a symptom somewhere, it's not always the root cause. So we don't want to go too deep into our, WebMD search of all this stuff. In the same way, we don't want to go over into our symptom checking if we don't know a basis on this. But on a superficial level, for most people, I feel comfortable saying if there is a sensitivity in your liver and you tap it and you breathe into it, for the most part, your body will bring about the raw material of qi, the consciousness, to bring about more balance. At the very least, you're bringing circulation in there, right? You're sending the blood, which has the immune system and helps to circulate the lymphatic system, your immune system. And you're also offering your consciousness there. This is important. There's more information coming from the body up to the brain than the brain down to the body, but we need to pay attention to it if we want to receive this information. So much of this information is just lost in the ethers and the subconscious circuits because we don't pay attention to it. But for example, when I begin to tune into my liver, like I focus my mind there, like my mind is soaking into it, like water soaking into a sponge, then my mind is absorbed in my liver. It's not looking at Facebook. What's Facebook going to tell me about my liver? Unless you read a post that I wrote about Facebook. About your liver. Even then, that's not directed at you. When you place your mind in your body, you're much more connected to the intelligence within. Now, there's a whole way of progressing from just like listening to really receiving the knowledge and information that your body is telling you about what your liver needs. And that's a progressive thing that comes with practice, such as medical Qigong practices. We work a lot with the organs. And it's not, this is why I don't like to say Qigong is like yoga. It's not so much a stretching system, though there are stretches in a lot of it. And a lot of what you'll see on the internet is stretching stuff because that's what most people want, right? But the organ listening and many other aspects come when you learn the systems. And when we begin to listen to the body more and more. Remember I said I got really stressed and my body was telling me something, but I just kept doing what everybody else was doing and I got myself deeper in my burnout. Eventually, when the burnout got so bad, I had to stop. And then I finally listened. Don't go that far. You don't need to. I mean, unless you're me and you need to do it so you learn the lesson, and you're going to do that anyways. So me saying this isn't going to do anything, but I'm going to say it anyways. Maybe I'm not going to say it to you. I don't want to preach to you. I'm going to say it to my past self, and maybe I'll remember it next time. Yeah, I hope so. I make a commitment to remember it next time. So what we need is often what we don't want. Now, this can be taken way out of context, but let's go back to my example of when I was overly young due to stress, not due to an accumulation of energy and a desire to help, just stress in the system fueled by fear and negative beliefs. It was hard for me to slow down. Because when I slowed down, my mind would be way too active. It would think about all the things it needed to do. It would be planning and planning and planning and goal-oriented and beyond the moment. It's not fulfilled now. There's so many things to do. Why would it want to slow down? I can't slow down. I know maybe intellectually that it would be good to slow down, but the experience of slowing down is quite uncomfortable because of the amount of stimulation that's in the system due to stress. So it's hella frustrating for yang people to slow down. So what they want in yoga practice is power practice often, or vinyasa. What they want in Qigong is to go really hard. What they often need is the opposite quality. So when I teach, I often tune into the group and the majority of people, and I work with their energy. So if we have a lot of young people, I'll often make them stand still. And I'll make them stand still, tuning into them till they're uncomfortable. Not because I like to torture people, not my kink, but because there's a therapeutic action when we stay in a posture longer than the mind, the initial and superficial impulse of the mind begins to tick. It's like, this is true for Shavasana and yoga, and this is true for standing meditation and many other things. If you get into a standard or static posture and you want to get beyond it, you're ready to do the next thing, stay in it longer. Stay in it to the point where you no longer want to leave it. So many more people are familiar with Shavasana. If you've had a really good practice and you've moved a lot and you get in Shavasana and you keep twitching and moving, your body hasn't shifted over to its deeper parasympathetic relaxed mode. It's still in yang activity sympathetic. The idea is to integrate the practice, and this is superficially the nervous system regulating itself, and at a deeper level, the subtle channels integrating the depth of the practice and you allowing yourself to go deeper into a meditative state. In Shavasana, this is like a death state. It can be a very deep state of samadhi even, but restoration in the system. So if you stay there and you stay till your mind quiets and you don't want to leave anymore and you're ready to, not necessarily you don't want to leave, but you feel at peace to leave and you feel at peace to stay. That's the gold. The reality of that is some people are so wound up and there's so much stress and negative emotion running in their system that they're not willing to feel and see, that they might sit there for hours, if not days, because without proper guidance and someone holding the space, they wouldn't be able to go there. So it's not realistic to actually give this as a recommendation for all people, but you get the sentiment, right? Stay in the posture till you've worked with the mind, because that habit pattern conditioning of the mind wanting to think and get to the next thing and move on is a compulsion, often driven by the deeper fear-based beliefs and the negative emotion that you may or may not be fully aware of or willing to feel at that moment, for possibly really positive reasons, possibly just from avoidance patterns. Yeah. So there's a real medicine in practicing Qigong standing practices because of how frustrating they can be. But what's on the other side is the regulation. Now, what's happening in a subtle energetic level is that yang pulse of energy being mobilized in the system begins to still, and you go deeper into your center. Now, I'm using this as a vague, metaphorical, and semi-spiritual term. There's an actual energetic reality when talking about the deeper channels and the energy centers of you going into your center that I'm not going to go into here. But there's a depth to going into your center. And there's many centers in the body. Most people are in their head center. They're up in their mind, yeah? We want to go deeper into the lower centers of the body, or center of gravity in the physical embodiment of the system. That's the aim in a lot of Qigong, at least. Now, once again, a beautiful topic that I won't go fully into is 5-element theory. So this is the basis of traditional Chinese medicine and a lot of Qigong. And they chart 5 negative emotions, though they connect with a lot more of a range than 5. We definitely have more than 5 emotions in the system. But these 5 emotions are connected like a medicine wheel, like the indigenous medicine wheel with the 4 colors, but in a 5 elemental system. They connect these with the 5 yin organs, and those are connected with yang organs. It's a whole system of the whole body, mind, and spirit complex as we know it. And I'm not going to go deep into all the associations, but there's a connection between the subtle movements of qi through the channel systems, which is different than the nervous system. And the subtle movements of this qi connect with the 5 emotions in their kind of gross form, as you could say. And these gross emotions, ew, those are gross emotions. Not like that. I mean, we're talking about the negative emotions in this context, but sure, gross negative emotions, we can go that. So we have these gross negative emotions, and they have subtle currents of energy as they move through the system. Now, when the emotional system is going well, the energy, the qi is flowing well through the system in a, you could say, a fairly uninhibited, like a free-flowing way, so that we process emotions. They happen and they move through us. When we experience negative emotion and we don't process it, we're not willing to feel it, this causes blockage in the system, yeah? And there's certain patterns of energy in a lot of the Qigong movements. If you're practicing good medical Qigong, because there's a lot of fluff Qigong out there. If you're practicing good medical Qigong, you'll practice a certain movement, which will have a certain energetic effect inside the body, which when you're practicing, you'll learn more and more how to feel and sense. So this isn't just a theoretical understanding or an intellectual understanding. You're experiencing this reality, and this will balance out the subtle energetics of the system, which will have a rippling effect into the gross emotions and into the physical functioning of the organism. So if an individual is experiencing a lot of anger, there's a certain Qigong practice for that. There's a number of them that could be done, depending on how we work with the 5-element theory in its controlling, generative, and other cycles. Once again, could be a whole episode. Not going to go too much deeper in it than that. But I'm offering this to share more about Qigong, yes, because it helped me a lot to deal with the fear-based beliefs that were preventing me from going deeper into my stillness practices and slowing down. So not only is Qigong a slower practice, meaning it can help to balance out the system, though it does have, I mean, in general, it's a slower practice. But it's prescriptive, yeah? If someone needs more yang, there's yang practices in it. If they need more yin, there's yin practices in it, and there's balance practices. But as I was going through fear, there is specific movements that can help with that fear, as well as even going in at the deeper levels of working with limiting beliefs and where they live in the body. So this is so important. Once again, this is something that is less explored in terms of Western culture, though we have fields of science called psycho, neuro, immuno, and endocrinology, which is the link between your mind, your body, your emotions, and your immune system, etc. It's in the literature, but it's less practice. We still separate mind and body for the most part in our psychology and in our medical practice and systems. But the link between our beliefs and our emotions and how we experience health and wellness is definitely in the literature in both West and East, yeah? So these fear-based beliefs within my system can be tracked and traced, right? So this is what a lot of coaching that I work with people in, and it's the basis of a lot of somatic work, is let's find what these triggers are. Let's find what these beliefs are. We can bring that up in a safe space, and that'll activate something in the system, in the body. We can trace these sensations and their movements of energy, and we can be in a safe space so that we feel comfortable to experience, express, and release, which will move the energy through the system, the blockage, and then we create clarity in the system. This will relieve the emotion that was causing the stickiness, which can help us to then repattern a new belief. We can't just think a thought, I'm rich, I'm rich, I'm rich. If there's a subconscious or semi-conscious belief that says otherwise, that's connected to negative emotion, because for the most part in that circumstance, the negative emotion will have much more of a grip due to the conditioning and its depth within the system from previous and past experience, pardon me. So when we do the work to find where these stories live in the body and to release the emotion, there's a space that's created for the new belief systems that are ultimately in higher alignment with universal principles. We have everything we need when we need it. We are vibrational beings connected to the all. I mean, like the all, like the force that creates universe is the same force that is within you. So whatever story that you have within you that feels like a limiting belief is just that. It's the limitations of your mind, just like you have limitations within your body. Not a bad thing. I can't squat 500 pounds. No problemo. One, I don't need to squat 500 pounds for anything. Two, if I want to expand the limitations of my body, I can work out and I can continue to move that threshold needle further and further. Same thing with the belief systems. If I'm tired of living in the limiting belief structures that I've been in, the patterns, then I can do the work to move that threshold more and more. Just like working out, it's a little bit uncomfortable, but as you do it regularly, you become detached from that sensation, and you can actually re-relate to it, or re-pattern the way you relate to that sensation, and then working out becomes a pleasurable discomfort, yeah? That's the yin and the yang balance. So too with inner work. There can be a certain level of surrender where it's a pleasurable release. In the meditative arts and in Qigong, we cultivate what's known as equanimity. And equanimity is very important to understand. Equanimity is the equal balance of your mind, and it cultivates stability of mind. It's not a state like happiness or sadness, which is a polarity, which has a high and a low. Equanimity is the stable state of contentment. Developing equanimity in practice means that regardless of your internal or external circumstance, you have a stability of mind to stay present and to stay contented. So regardless of positive sensations in the body and your cravings to them, which is the habit pattern reaction, or negative sensations in the body and your aversion to them, another habit pattern reaction, you remain equanimous and detached so that you can choose to respond and act from that place rather than react. Now, this happens in our practice when we're standing in standing pose and many other things that bring up things, negative emotions, positive, and our reactions. Then we have opportunities to choose. What is happening inside, as above, so below, is happening as a pattern outside of us. So the more we practice this internally, the more we go out in the world and we see, once again, as I was sharing, I was living in many control patterns though positive as they may seem, they may have been, and most of them were, just control patterns to bring about a sense of pleasure, because that's what I was craving, because I didn't want to feel what was actually there for me. So I clung to pleasurable experiences, which had a diminishing return the more that I tried to experience pleasure without going deeper down into what I was really needing to feel, because there was avoidance mechanisms. And so long as we're blocking out something that's coming up in the system and trying to feel something, we develop a controlling life and a incessant need for safety and a certain, regulation of our patterns in mind and all these things that don't allow us to make authentic soul growth, but we're just not doing the work there. And so too with negativity, well, it's kind of the same thing. It's like if we're avoiding something, we're going to cling to what we think we want. So a lot of practice, standing practice and meditation, is about doing things for a period of time where we don't care about the result. And this is so counterculture to the goal-oriented growth mind. Once again, this is deep within the conditioning of the system, and it's so highly rewarded, the overachiever. Once again, achieving, amazing. If you achieve a lot, double amazing. Good on ya. But if it's coming from a fear-based belief system, and this is the vibration that you're offering, so shall you receive. And does it really matter that you've created that company, that you've offered this to the world? What's the fundamental, like the deepest level of that vibration? That's the true offering. So we practice equanimity to build a greater capacity to be with life as it is, not how we wish it would be in terms of the polarities of craving and aversion. And this can connect us with the natural contentment that lives within everybody's heart at the deepest levels of their being, at their center. When we do this, this is yin. This is going into the yin, and this is the remedy for that obsessive yang, desiring and craving, goal obsession, constant movement, stress, and continuing to have more and more things without finding fulfillment. Further, I mentioned safety as a big part of why countries are less stressed. As I mentioned earlier, safety comes within. It's not through external circumstances. So a lot of what I was wanting to do was create safety in my life by having enough money, but to the point where I wasn't regulating my own nervous system all the time, or addressing the fears that were truly driving it. Even though I was practicing regulation, I wasn't getting at the things. It's like you can do all the right things. I could, I eat healthy organic food. I was meditating daily, going to dance. And for the most part, many of these things were great and sustaining, and I was having growth. But if I'm avoiding key fear-based beliefs, then these will be my downfall. So this is how it works insofar as I can see. We first create safety within us. And insofar as we can do that on our own, great. And if not, we find the help and support of others. But ultimately, we need to create that safety within us by addressing the fear. And most of it is fear-based beliefs, because the fears aren't actually present for most people, in that there's not a tiger in the room. It's more of the what ifs and the future stuff. And this is so connected to why yang is always in the future, because it's in its mind and it's in its fear-based beliefs. It's in its belief systems rather than experiencing the present moment. So it's going off into what ifs, and the mind is so good. As soon as it feels, it has a motivating emotion, it can create all kinds of stories and scenarios and go off, and you can spend an entire lifetime in your mind and never really touch in and come into incarnation in this physical reality in the present moment with breath awareness. So my work has been, yes, to continue all the things and to have an increased level of awareness, which is not just something within me, it's the help of my community and my family and so many others, to help me to see the things in my blind spot so that I can address those core beliefs, those core wounds, the early conditioning, the conditioning that many others face in their life, and to create a little buffer through detachment, through cultivating safety in my body, to orienting towards what I want by determining my values, to recognizing all of these things, even if it means taking financial losses or losses at success or missed opportunities, depending on how you frame that, and see what beliefs are truly fueling the behavior. For example, if I can't be still, typically that's not a loving belief that's fueling that. It's a fear-based belief driving me out of my own center. So my work has been to surrender to love and choose to enlist beliefs in harmony with my goals, goal affirmative beliefs in accordance with universal principles. Either way, there will be pain and pleasure, success and loss. There's not the transcending of the tides of yin and yang in the ordinary sense of you'll never experience pain, but it's the detachment from the reactivity to pain. And some of the teachings I've received as I learn about the sun dance and many other rites of passage, and there's a way to offer up all of what we are, all of our emotions, all of our thoughts, all the things that we do to God. And that may not be a languaging that resonates to you, but there's a capacity to surrender and offer up what we experience. So it's no longer just through the I. It's not I experiencing all of this through me and my lens of my personal story and ego. There's a way to experience all things through the all, as the all. There's a greater connection to all beings, because when I go into my deepest, darkest pain and I'm connected with the pain of others, it's no longer just my pain. I'm out at a deeper level than my own personal story and relationship to that. And in that shared experience, not only can I experience that pain, in my opinion, in a greater depth, but also the shared holding of that pain. Because that pain is not simply there. It's also held by a greater field of love. And when I'm connected as well with that greater field of love, there's more capacity and resilience. So much of what I was experiencing, and it can go on and on about the layers and the things, but it was fear and isolation of the ways in which I was self-sabotaging and limiting myself by thinking, just being caught in my own stories and fear process. When all the while, when I finally broke some of the barriers down to my heart, I could reach out and also reach in for that field of love that is inside, outside, depending on how we want to articulate these things. So there's this capacity that we all have to transcend what is the initial limitation. It's like we want to be careful with our belief systems and what we say. We don't want to say that the path is easy, but what was hard becomes easy. And our relationship to our definitions of what easy and hard are changed. So to say anything kind of becomes, you know what I'm getting at? To say any one thing can mean so many things. It's like all of life is poetry. We think it's prose sometimes because we speak in it so often, but we say one thing and we mean 10,000 things, said and unsaid, knowledgeably expressed and unexpressed. So coming back to the original reason for this, it's like, are you stressed? Do you agree with the values of society and the momentum of culture and growth? Does it feel in harmony with what is best for you and your family and the growth of our earth to live in the way that you've been living? Do the values that the majority of our culture hold reflect yours? And are you caught up in the momentum of what the mass culture is doing? And insofar as you are you out of integrity with yourself? And if you have beliefs, and I encourage you to write out those values for how you want to live, for your work-life balance, what your values are for your relationships, what your values are for spirituality. And insofar as you can, track those with the other people in your life and the culture, and see where you are in and out of alignment with those, and what actions can you take to begin to live a life that is in higher alignment. And then what are the belief systems, particularly the limiting and negative beliefs, that prevent you from doing that? And you'll have a very deep understanding going through that process. And you can do some of this work on your own, but in my opinion, it's almost always better to do it with the support of other people, because of what I mentioned earlier with blind spots and having a safe container to be able to do things. It can be hard to hold a safe container for ourselves and to see our own blind spots. That's the nature of our shadow, yeah? It's always behind us. So it can be good to seek somebody like myself or another individual who's developed in this type of work, to get clear on these values and what may be blocking you, and to find the somatic links where this lives in the body, and then going through a process to release that emotion and developing internal arts practices that allow you to maintain your regulation and your continued practice, so that it's not just about seeking somebody else to hold space with you. There's a continual process that you undertake to continue to maintain and cultivate your energy and those belief systems. So it's more of an empowerment process. I empower you, you empower me, and we help one another out in this collaborative way. This for me is part of the teachings of what it is to shift more into a harmonious, a more yin way of interacting in our society, less individual growth oriented, and more tuning in to the shared emotions and things that we're going through, and helping one another, finding greater regulation. And part of that is co-regulation. We co-regulate our nervous systems with one another. When we breathe together, there's something special that happens as we both breathe the same air. But something deeper than that, when we share in those same emotions, when we're seen and we're heard on those deeper levels, there's something that activates, it connects us to our shared process here. And this for me is so important as we continue to move forward in life through all of our challenges, to know that we're not alone, and to continue to collaborate and increase the inter and intra relationships with ourselves and others. So if you're looking to get clear on your values and act on them regardless of results, and you're looking for practices to regulate your system and help you rewire your beliefs and create resilient patterns in your system, consider sending me a message to work one-on-one, coming to a class, or reaching out to somebody and offering what you can. Thank you for listening. As I mentioned, this is a near and dear topic to my heart, and I've done a lot of work on it over the last few years. And just another personal share here. It came at first with a lot of shame, because I am an internal arts practitioner. I was like, wait, I teach yoga and meditation and I'm stressed? Wow, I'm so out of integrity. But then I'm like, how does an individual learn about something? Well, they're going to have to go into its opposite. And to the degree they know its opposite, they can find, well, the other opposite of its opposite. You know, right? If you want confidence, go into your fear of what it is to be unconfident and shameful in the ways you hide. And if you know what I mean? So part of this is my exploration into the depth of my dysregulation and my imbalance, to find a higher level of harmony. And I feel like that's the threshold to change, is often to go into the opposite polarity to a certain extent, and then to recalibrate the system, just as what is happening, microcosm of the macrocosm of the pole shift of West and East. The West exploring their doing nature, and now there's this increased call towards plant medicines and meditation to recalibrate us and course correct. And to the degree we went out of balance, it's like a slingshot. And we can slingshot, and hopefully not just slingshot the other way, but to kind of get more of a rhythm of going back and forth. So it doesn't need to be pull shift to pull shift, extreme to extreme, but rather a much more. I'm picturing those like metal ball things. I don't know if this is the best metaphor or analogy, where they're like ting, 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 and they hit, and it's like perfectly harmonious going to side. I don't know if that connects at all to what I was saying, but that's the visualization I got in my mind. Anyways, I'm off to go walk in the forest and then practice Muay Thai. That's my balance. Ease, and then effort, and then eat. So I'm wishing you a nourishing time with whatever you're doing after, and an encouragement to connect with your breath after listening to this and allow the information to digest. And I'll see you on another podcast. Aya Om.